series here in the workshop over at Building Momentum and Naval X in Alexandria. I am joined today by a really august panel, but first I want to tell you that we're going to be talking about using models and decision aids in complex environments, and what does that mean? We are going to challenge some ideas about how we can actually solve problems by looking at models and logic algorithms as solutions instead of just siloed activities. So first, I'd like everyone who's on the call to get a chance to introduce themselves and say why they're interested in this topic. I'll start to my right here with Lieutenant Commander Oslebo. Go ahead and tell everyone about yourself.
Hi, I'm Damian Oslebo. I'm at Naval Sea Systems Command at the Washington Navy Yard in the Marine Engineering Group. I'm a general AI enthusiast. I did research in non-intrusive load monitoring and always generally very excited about data science and machine learning applied to our marine environments.
Excellent. I can see my friend Mr. Curtis Mullen on my Zoom here. Curtis, if you'll take a minute and introduce yourself and tell us why you're interested in this topic. Oh, I don't hear you. I think it's on our end, so hold on a second, Curtis.
Can you guys hear me now?
Oh, there you are. Yes. Yay.
Perfect. Okay. Again, all right. So from the top, Nicole, thanks for inviting me to this. I'm currently the Deputy Director for NAVSEA 03S, which is a whole mouthful, but basically we own and operate all of the ship maintenance business systems that are used at our intermediate and depot maintenance facilities. So generally those are the naval shipyards, regional maintenance centers, and our ship repair facility out in Japan. So we're oftentimes very interested in business applications, everything from material management, material ordering, all the way up through work execution and even on the HR side of things. But we also have an intense interest in connecting shop floor equipment to those business networks and understanding how we can synthesize some of our HR and workload data and map that back to kind of how CNC machines, 3D printers are supporting workloads at those industrial facilities. So as you can imagine, as workloads grow, as we do more and more work in the industrial sector that's connected to machines, management of all of that becomes too much for our human brains to manage. So you really kind of have to use, machine learning, AI, and similar, type tools to reach an optimal solution. So I'm really focused on the ship maintenance community on the shore side specifically, and really interested in that opportunity of connecting business data to the industrial side of operations.
Awesome. I also see my other friend Kyle Denton in the call here, and I would like you to get a chance to introduce yourself as well. Does he hear me?
Of course. Really excited to join. Thank you, Nicole, for this opportunity. My name is Kyle Denton. I'm from Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, their digital transformation manager, and I'm a graduate researcher with Gonzaga University, researching the intersection of technology leadership and change, especially virtuality and digital transformation and ethics. So with that, on flank speed with you quite frequently as one of the Navy Champions Network leads. So that's really exciting to see how we have these tools available to integrate with people on the ground.
So I will tell you how this, for everyone who's listening, I will tell you how this conversation came to be. We were researching, doing discovery for the track challenges here at Hack the Machine. One of the things that we came up with in a particular AOR, it came down to task and resource management. And in a integrated community, Group A owns the plan, Group B owns the tools, Group C owns the people. And they don't all work for each other, and they don't all have the same schedule or the same priorities necessarily. But they do have a certain pattern of activity, right? They have a certain thing that they're doing all the time that you could kind of count on if you could see the data behind it, if you knew what that pattern was. And so a lot of times humans are now in the process of like call around, figure out the details, and then in the moment try and make a decision. And they're doing this repetitively, and it's slowing down the ability to execute. So when I was, I know Curtis from working with things over at the shipyards, it's a very similar thing happening on the maintenance floor, right? And who knows what, where's that data? How are we able to make a decision quickly so that we can move forward and execute on time? So I was like, well, if I abstract the specifics of the situation, the question becomes, is there a way, is it even possible to take models across these different communities and create them and then integrate decision logic aids to actually change how we're executing? And I don't know if it's possible or not. You guys are smarter about this than I am. But I wanted to tee up the discussion with people who are materially concerned with this, right, and want to see it happen. So just from your own knowledge basis, is it possible, or is this like a pie in the sky dream? And anyone's allowed to answer. Go ahead.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, the answer is definitely yes. The answer is definitely yes. I approach this. My office is responsible, as Nicole said, right? You have various groups that are, approaching this from different angles, right? My group is really on the IT delivery side, so we can take a look at this problem, and given our knowledge of, what's available in the technology sector and what we are organically available, we can say, hey, here's some of the work on over the longer term, all of that kind of stuff. But I think you drove home an interesting point, which is in a highly complex world like ship maintenance, right? It drives us to be specialists. There's a lot of specialists, right? Which naturally requires you to kind of have a very focused vision on your specific problem. But when you talk about these models that can drive efficiencies kind of across value streams, it requires a lot of different interactions across those value streams, which we're not always used to doing. So I think yes, and I think from my perspective on the technology side, it's definitely doable. Oftentimes our biggest concern is really getting our arms fully around the problem, not just the high level, I want to go faster on shop floor B or something like that, but really understanding where our infrastructure lies today, what's the specific problem you want to solve, and not trying to drive solutions to fit our existing problems, or not trying to make our problems fit existing solutions, but kind of doing that the other way around. So yes, I think it's possible, but you got to get all those communities that are used to very narrowly focusing on their current problems to kind of expand that discussion envelope and collaboration envelope so that they can really kind of drive home to something that's effective long term.
And I think I've seen almost like a perfect storm that's happened, that where the leadership and the technical sides are joining together. Maybe they've read the same literature or something like that, but we're getting push on both sides, at least in the condition-based monitoring world, of people from the leadership side really wanting to push this thing forward, and then from the technical side pushing that up from the ground up. And they're meeting together, and we're trying to we're making great strides in that, moving the envelope in this AI environment for condition-based maintenance.
Okay. So what are the steps to getting this to being, Curtis, you mentioned like the broader community, right? This is multiple subject matter experts that have to like be on the same page, or in the AOR, multiple owners of different parts of the value chain that have to be on the same page. Or do we go to them and say, hey, tell me all your dirty laundry, show me all your processes? Is it give me all your data and I'll figure it out for you? What is the right approach to have this conversation?
That's actually a really hard problem on where to start. We have so many different people with ideas of fixing their individual problem or fixing other problems that they see. And we don't have unlimited resources. And really when I come to that gets to like people to actually sit down and collaborate and solve problems. So we may get someone that says, hey, this problem costs me 7 hours of basically wasted time in a given day, right? And for someone that maybe works 8 hours a day, it's not very useful. And you might look at that problem and say, well, oh, that's the one I want to go focus on. But there may be a slightly less drastic problem that affects more people, right? So say you have a problem that that is causing a half hour of downtime in an 8 hour day, but it affects 100 people rather than the other one that affects maybe 1 or 2. And getting our arms around what are the most important problems to solve first has been actually pretty difficult. There's no shortage of people saying, hey, I have an idea for improving operations. There's no shortage of that. And anyone in the digital transformation world will probably look at the list of things that they want to do and probably be daunted by all the things that we need to fix, because it starts, all the way down at the lowest level of infrastructure, especially when you're talking about the yards, right? Do you have network capacity in the place where you're collecting data? Can you get that to a network where you can do analysis? Do you have people that have the skill sets to perform that analysis if the network's available? Do they have the tools to do it? So even when you investigate a small problem, it usually fans out, given kind of the nature of our current infrastructure, to really incorporating a lot more problems, and understanding where to start is oftentimes very, very difficult in our world.
Yeah. That's a huge, and that definitely resonates with me. There's almost this, how do you create the ecosystem that, like Rear Admiral Selby mentioned, where we can unlock lower level innovation too? Because most of the infrastructure to get there, the right data sensitivity, the right controls, the right bandwidth, everything, it takes a high level push. That's a lot of work to go get something new out there. And yet we know that from industry experience that you have to start with something small. So you have a big plan, but you still have to start with small changes and iterate and learn, which is really difficult when you have a limited amount of person bandwidth to go and do actions from a high level across the organization. And so one of the things I see in the challenge, and I'm going to mention it probably a few times, is, how can we collaborate with workers at every level to start feeding into an ecosystem? And there's a lot of big things that have to happen for that. And, I almost see there's a spectrum between, the very simple machine-human interaction where we can automate some routine tasks, which is really important to having those models kind of fleshed out, very simple level, versus the more complex big data sets where you're going to definitely need digital engineers, architects, data scientists, people who know how to play in that realm. And so it's a really complex, I like how you framed it, Curtis. It's a super complex problem. How do we unleash the limited human capacity we have, also knowing that we don't have all the skill sets yet either?
Yeah, absolutely. Skill sets is a big piece. And also, I think from the technology side, we can always look at a problem and say, oh man, if we only had this platform. But implementing a platform is oftentimes a very lengthy process, and leadership doesn't want to hear, this small problem that you want to solve today, it'd be super easy in a year and a half. They're not they're not into that. So we're trying to do things small that get us into that learning mode, right? I'm finding right now when it comes to data integration, right? I've got some very smart data engineers who understand how to put together transactional systems, but when it comes to relational or dimensional data or graph data or something that can be used in a different manner than our traditional business systems, that skill set's not always there. So you've got to create learning opportunities for that organically, because bringing in an external expert to look at that, they don't understand our business. So you got to train them that way. So you're in a catch-22 in some scenarios of, do you upskill your existing employees who probably have the skill sets to do it, but need a little bit of learning? Or do you bring someone in from the outside and teach them our business, which is equally as hard, especially when you get down into, some of our more specific industrial ops. So
I wonder if we could go after an idea, right? So Kyle, like you mentioned before, we're both in this champions group, right? And this champions group kind of sprang up organically of people who wanted to see things go right, and then became a little more formal. And if I were to say, hey, take the shipyards as an example, hey, across there, they call them community of practices, but I'd like to get away from the traditional idea of that and say, let's take everybody who's a machinist, right? Everyone who's on the shop floor, let's get them together and talking about what the things are they're seeing and doing, right? There's some commonalities there. You're going to learn some things that would help form your models. They're going to be motivated to work with some people to help them, right? And you might find that you got some diamonds in the rough that actually know a little bit about data science and actually can help form some of those things, because what we've learned in the Champions group, the people that show up are across the board. They have different backgrounds, different jobs. They come into that group and they're really passionate about the data science thing, and you're like, well, I would have never come and asked you for that because I didn't know that you had that talent or you had that interest, right? And is there a way to think about, and maybe the machine is not the right example, but to think about some of these problems from a champions group type of thing, because we do have limited resources, but we could have some people who are passionate about getting after those answers and have that SME knowledge. And if we could pull them from the engineering community in 05 and the logistics side in 04 and 03 from the infrastructure, and then from the actual workforce floor, you might actually find that you get there faster than sort of the stovepipes approaches. Thoughts?
I always think that more collaboration is a great idea, and breaking out of the stovepipes, making sure that all the communities are networked together, so that one program office isn't doing the same thing as another program office. So they're not contending for the same constrained resources. That would be a great idea. As far as establishing the champions group, I'm not quite sure on how to start that, but it's interesting to think about how would we collectively grab everybody from these different areas.
Right. I'm just thinking, instead of it being like communities of practice around a job title, like all the systems engineers or all the BFMs or what have you, have it be about a problem set, like an area we want to modernize or improve, and say, hey, everybody who's interested in getting after this and has, who's willing to put in a little extra time and then some capability towards it, come to the table and let's talk about it. And
instead of a product focus, you're talking about a capability. I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
And again, I don't know who owns, technically those could be organic groups. They don't have to be started by someone. Someone could just kick it off and see, and garner some attention and go from there. But it would be good to have some leadership championship, right? Where this is the Navy, you tend to do better when you got some people cheering you on from the top. So one of the things that was brought up is the idea of SMEs with their head down doing the thing that they're very good at, right? Because we don't want to slow people down from doing their jobs. Is there a point at which, though, we say, hey, you need to learn some additional skills because what you're really good at is great, but I need you to be better at some things you're currently not doing?
I think conference participation is a very important, skill, networking skill. Not everybody gets to use that in the government, and also you get what we call continuous learning in the government, points that you need to get every year. Otherwise, you're delinquent. Be able to participate in these conferences to, see all the different industry avenues, industry research. That's an important thing to be able to do. I wish everybody was able to be afforded that opportunity.
I'll jump in, and I think it goes all across the spectrum. I mean, especially for, in a lot of this series talking about UXVs, all the different types of unmanned vehicles. I mean, what's the changing nature of the work for naval shipyards, for other organizations across the naval maintenance complex? There's this point where data is actually a product as well. When it's a decision framework that literally is used to shift workforce and dollars and priorities, it's one of those things to think about a little bit differently. It's no longer just a resource, it's part of what we create. And the needs for the skill sets, there's things that are antiquated, right? OMB memo 1921 said December 31st, 2022, no longer going to accept paper records at federal record centers, right? And for some organizations across the federal government, that's a big push to go and get rid of paper. I like to joke about my war on paper. So, right? But I mean, that's how a lot of organizations operate. You got inch-thick paper packages that runs the jobs. And there's the first step as I look at digital transformation, where it is going to be new things a lot of people have to learn. When they're used to using a blue or black ballpoint pen and the specific forms, and now you're asking them to put something into a computer that looks nothing like what they're used to. What we're finding is people are very familiar with the layout of the form. And once you start having the same names for the blocks, but it's all in different places, it's not the same experience. So there's a lot of learning that comes in, a lot of hands-on back and forth experience. So we're literally looking at the roles of, technology champions, managers, people who can help show the workforce how these new tools are used in a way that I don't think we've really done before, because it used to be, well, everybody has a computer on the outside. They work just the same, right? No, they don't. So yeah, it's a thing. And I think the real challenge of leadership is not only in recognizing it, but in recognizing it's our responsibility to create the environment for that continuous learning. And that it's part and parcel with the work.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a lot of success, and this has just happened organically, with cross-training some of our technology professionals to really have a deep understanding of what's going on at the shipyards or the industrial facilities. One of the examples I like to use, and this wasn't a lot of cross-training because our kind of project lead or product lead for replacing our current scheduling tool that we use at the depot maintenance facilities, he's an ex-chief scheduler, right? And he's been learning about the IT landscape for the past 5 years. And when we said it's time to replace our scheduling tool, there's no better person from our technology team who really has a deep understanding of the functional side to kind of spearhead that. And then at the same time, we're trying to upskill our functional folks to be data aware, to be technology aware, to have a better idea. So there's cross-training both ways, right? There's cross-training from the technology side to get them closer to the business, right? There's nothing worse than moving decision makers farther from the problem that they're trying to solve, right? They're going to sub-optimize for sure. And at the same time, we want our folks that are, on the waterfront, in the different engineering codes at the industrial facilities, to be more data aware, to be more technology aware. Now I'm not gonna educate or make a nuclear engineer become an expert in our security compliance regime, right? That is RMF, right? That's not necessarily value added, but right there's a certain degree of technology awareness that we need our functional community to be aware of, and same goes for our technology professionals, right? They really need to be closer to the business and closer to the problem.
So I wonder if it's a mixture of things where you're talking about bringing in, one of the reasons we do Hack the Machine, of course, is to non-traditionals and community members community out in the industry and in academia who've never worked with the DoD, give them an opportunity to see where they could be of value. And, you're right, when you're down at the waterfront and you're working, they don't have time to become the people who are also going to develop the decision logic algorithms and put those things in place, right? That's not where their value is. But we need to give them some partners who can do that for them, right? Who can sit there and in their space and in their environment understand and be able to talk the language with the rest of the value stream to build that interconnected thing. And I don't know how you do that. I mean, it seems like even with the shipyard, there's some disconnection there, and what happens where and who's in charge of what and how does some of those decisions get made. And I know that happens within NAVC as a whole, across the directorates and the programs. And I know NAVC 03 is getting after that, right? Like we're trying to bring some of that foundational infrastructure to place.
Yeah, you look at any value stream across NAVSEA, and it ebbs and flows on the capability of government folks to really own that technical baseline, right? NAVSEA 05, the engineering directorate, went through that in the 90s and early 2000s of really reclaiming technical baselines for ships. And we're finding that we have to really reclaim our technical baseline for processes at the industrial facilities. We have a lot of people that know how to execute a process, but they don't necessarily understand why that process exists. And that's equally as important when you're trying to, transform the way we use technology. There's not a lot of use sometimes in just making an existing manual process digital. I mean, it may save you a little time, but ultimately, if you don't understand the why of what you're doing, if you just understand the how, then you're going to sub-optimize. And getting those value stream champions and building that back up has been more difficult in some areas than others. In some areas, we have natural folks that really understand the theory behind, let's say, complex project scheduling, right? That's a big deal. But if you're talking about people understanding the theory behind how we do financial management at the shipyards, that's highly arcane. And, creating a system to replace our existing financial management tool is proving to be very difficult because there's always a tendency to just replace what we have as is, but maybe with a more modern screen, which really doesn't ultimately get you anywhere besides spending a lot of money. So
yeah, that's such a good point you drove there. Like, we got to look at why. What do we actually need to accomplish? It's not just like we talk about this for digital transformation, and it's like, okay, so you have a paper form now, the most common denominator. People are like, okay, let's make this a digital piece of paper, like a PDF form. And, I look at it and I'm like, okay, why are we filling it out though? When you're just repackaging and making it digital and you look at your value stream and spaghetti charts, whichever way you want to track how the process is flowing, just making it a PDF, it often goes the same route. It goes into inboxes, it goes into folders, they get lost. And so that's where you, like Curtis said, you have to look at what's the intended outcome. Why are you doing it? And even ask the question, do we need this process or piece of paper, or is there a better, different way to do it? And that's where I like to look at the different levels of digital transformation. Some frameworks, you can see it switch different ways. Digitizing it, super low level. Streamlining, routinizing, automating, and then actually transforming and doing things differently. So take, for example, a piece of paper to request temp services out on a project for naval maintenance, right? A piece of paper used to be what every industry used. So you can turn it into digital. That's good. And you can actually then start automating it and having notifications go automatically to the people that need it. Now think about something entirely different. The goal isn't to perform the piece of paper. The goal is to get the temp service in place. So say we have FathomBot, virtual agents within Microsoft 365. Imagine a world where a worker on an authorized device could say, hey, I need electricity here. And it says, based on your wireless location, are you at Pier 3? Okay, what type of service do you need? And then automatically sends a scheduling request to the temp service deployment crew, right? So that's an entirely different way to look at the same problem. And I'm not saying that's the solution we're going to.
So, what's funny about that is I was going to say it makes me think of condition-based maintenance, quite frankly, because you think about how maintenance was done traditionally, and then you get to the idea of condition-based maintenance, and it's not just, okay, now on the schedule, you're supposed to go in and do the thing. You're doing it based on data, right?
It's a systemic type issue, but I was actually thinking of another thing. We've got to recognize like the colloquial differences between the work centers, the shipyards, the operation centers. Each person or each group might do things a little differently, have their own rule sets. And then when a new commander comes in or a new manager comes in, things can change overnight. And how do you make sure that recognizing those provincial differences between the
Is that
work
part of
centers.
the problem, though? The fact that we
That
have
is
so much colloquial provincial differences in an enterprise system that needs to work together. I mean, I'm asking. I don't know the answer to that, right?
Yeah.
This is just a general question. And the reason
Curtis,
I say
you
that
got
is,
this one.
This is a problem that I spend much of my waking hours trying to solve, which is, and this comes from the top. I mean, this is, things are funded through silos at OpNav, right? And so you already have structural separation when it comes to your administrative command reporting chain. There's already changes then across who controls your operational scope, and then there's funding issues, right? I mean, especially if you're talking about the shipyard, right? Let's say you're funding the Boise for an availability, and there's some money there that could be used to improve a process that will be used downstream on a lot of other availabilities, but it doesn't make sense a business case for just one availability. There's not a huge incentive to do it because of the structural way that we fund things. But it's pervasive, and that's a hard nut to crack. And I really think that's where collaboration comes in. That's where we're talking about. I think people-to-people interactions can overcome some of those barriers, but it's a big problem. It's half of my daily job is trying to break down those structural barriers so that they're not impediments to getting good work done.
I think the point was maybe that there's not maybe a one-size-fits-all solution to anything. We've got to recognize that we got to work within a larger system and with
so if we were
political interests.
If we were using machine learning as the bridge, right? And again, this original conversation that we're talking about with the shipyards, but original conversation started in an AOR where not everything is owned by the same, combatant commands or even the same countries. And they're all cooperating together, but they all have their own thing that they're doing. Is the machine learning element of it, the autonomous, the decision logic, could that be the bridge that helps you keep maintaining your colloquial activities, but helps us all still move faster and learn from each other? Could that be the way we, instead of trying to fight that culture, some of those cultural pieces, we can automate past them?
I would say yes. It's how do we get to that point where we can capture that data to be able to create the model? Even the example I used of the temp service request going into bot, that's a very low level way of doing it where we have to request a service versus if it was predictive maintenance, it's already there, right? We would have to have a way to capture that data into an ecosystem to be able to say, hey, you tend to request this service when this job is scheduled. I think it's one of the goals working towards that ability. The challenge, like Curtis lives daily, is how do we get there? How do we get that initial ecosystem in place? Tying together all the digital threads that exist all across the technical domain for these digital systems. That's the thing right now. We have a lot of different groups, a lot of different capabilities, all in different places with different languages, and it's getting everybody onto the same playing field and understanding terms the same way. Even I'll tell you, even just from one maintenance community to another, they have the same process. They'll talk and use the same word for it. But once you actually peel back a little bit and look at how they do it down on the deck plates, it's like, oh, that's a whole lot of different right there, right? You use a logbook and you have something on the front of the work package that everybody fills out, yet everybody else over here has to go back to the main shop and it's in a binder, right? Curtis, strong person for the job you do.
That point,
when you get into all these integration problems, right, you need people that understand some of the different variations with that theme, right? Application integration, which is, Oh, did
I lose Curtis?
Okay, I thought it was just me.
And so everyone says, why can't I just have everything work together? There's a lot of nuance to those problems, which is part of what we're trying to solve. And I'll go back to what I mentioned earlier, is some of those skill sets don't exist organically within our community. So we're trying to build them. And a lot of it is because people haven't got into trying to implement a solution and understood the problems that you naturally run into. And so they'll dive into something that may not be fit for purpose for their problem. And then you really get a lot of rework, right? In our industrial facilities, rework is kind of the worst way you can do things, but it happens in our IT community a lot. And whether that arises from a skill set imbalance or a misunderstanding of the problem, those are all things that we have to go solve.
I like this discussion because it kind of reminds me back of my old NIWIC days, where we were working on a recommender system. So basically the operation planners selected the things that they liked, and it would develop a system over time of, hey, this is what you really like. Almost like an Amazon,
like the predictive.
Amazon recommender.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me of this part right here reminds me of that a lot, and I think that's pretty interesting.
If I were on a floor and I had like an Amazon recommender for resource management, so I didn't have to figure out like what are the supplies I'm going to need to go do my job, and it knows, because now this is what I do all the time, and it's learned from the activity on the floor. And it's like, oh, you put this job in, you're going to need this, this, and this tooling on this thing, and we've queued it up for you. You're like, awesome, you just saved me how much time? And it's all here. And I can tell you that everything's here that I need, and the machine's in good shape, and I can go and do my job. Cool. Let's go to work, right? But you're right. We had to build that, right? That's not going to be a push button solution. For the people who come into this event and are eager to come in and help the Navy, if you had a question, or if you had a request to them on how they could come and help you, like what could they bring to the table, or what would you like to see, demonstrated that would be of use to get after this more quickly and more effectively? And I'd like to hear from all of you on that one.
All right, I'll jump in. The first thing is your skill sets with computer technology, innovation, being very motivated to go and explore with others the problems, and being willing, because I think for most of us in the naval maintenance community, we could say we all wear a few different hats. We have our day job, then we have our other day job, and then the job we got volunteered for, right? It's all about doing more for the national defense, for projecting peace, for ensuring that our sailors have sound platforms they go out to sea with, right? So how can we tap that motivation, that energy for the greater good? Bring that. If you're somebody who wants to make a difference in the world, and you believe that we have a way we can use technology to streamline, automate, and integrate how we do things, that'd be the biggest thing. Bringing that skill set and really looking at tackling a challenge. I think that's the big thing, the type of people we're looking for.
Okay. And Curtis, you have any additional thoughts or what you would ask for?
I'm not going to ask for anything specific from a solution set perspective, but I do want to say, I want to encourage vendors, if they don't understand a problem, that maybe we put out through an RFP in a formal acquisition or through an OTA consortium, please follow up and be relentless about that. Because if you don't understand a problem, but you don't want to come across as not understanding something, you want to just assume that we in the government have accurately articulated what we want, but it's not really clear to you, please come back and ask and pepper us with questions, because we've definitely received suboptimal proposals when I'm sure people are they're making assumptions about what we need when we're not necessarily clear about it ourselves up front. So rather than asking for specific solutions, I'd really ask for kind of more of that feedback as we put out requests for proposals or problem statements via OTs, is really just come back and make sure you understand the problem from our perspective, because we talk in acronyms, we talk in our organic lingo, we assume people know more than they do, and when we're putting together those requests and that outreach to industry, it's not always clear to us when something isn't well stated or adequately defined. And so a lot of vendors are good with that, but I've also seen a lot of kind of really terrible proposals. And I think a lot of it comes in, if a teacher gives a test to a class and one person fails out of the class, then maybe that person didn't get it. But if everyone fails, then maybe the teacher created a terrible test. And sometimes that happens. So, really that's what I'd ask industry to do, is just make sure when we're putting out our problem statements, you really understand it and pepper us with questions to kind of work around why that problem exists, work around the different ways that you can solve that. So that's what I'd ask.
Yeah, help us learn better on how to ask for things. And that goes for position descriptions too. Like, we're trying to get new skills in, and if you see something go out on, I don't care, USA Jobs or wherever, and you're like, what do you want me to do? Tell somebody, because we're trying to get help and get people in the system.
Yep.
Like, speak up.
I like Curtis's point, whereas you don't want to pick the solution. You want people to be creative, because if the moment you suggest something, then every RFI, RFP that comes back is going to have that language. You've already kind of constrained what you're going to get back.
So do you have anything
and make sure the solutions are fit for purpose, right? There's nothing worse than someone who has a product and says, well, my product could kind of meet your need, and maybe if I craft my language well enough, it'll come across as being exactly what I need. But our goal in the technology landscape is to deploy things that are fit for purpose, because that's generally the most efficient way to do it. So that's a good way to attack any problem.
So I want to challenge, I actually have a question from the audience, but I also want to challenge the government side here, because we had this conversation yesterday, and someone from one of the workforce centers mentioned this. We got to start being able to give distro A level types of examples and of information, because if they've never been to the shipyards, they've never walked the floor, they have no idea what that environment is.
Absolutely.
They can't guess, right? They don't even know the right questions to ask. If they've never sat in at 197 on the yard or somewhere like that, they don't know what's happening in the building. They don't understand that flow of what happens internally. We got to start figuring out a way how we can share with them something representative, so that they can come to the table and really, really be able to process what we're saying, because of the big differences between government and industry.
We do have industry days. They're maybe not as frequent as they might. They do take a lot of work to prepare for, but there are industry days, and then after the history lives on after those days. But I'm not. Is that the question where you're going with?
I'm not sure that industry days give the right. We talked about representative data sets. If you want someone to try and build algorithms for you, give them something to play with to understand what you got, right? And we talked about. When you talk about workflows and processes, the question that the audience member says is, how are we on workflow documentation? And I almost wanted to laugh when I read it, because from my experience, we're not the best. And now maybe you guys really are great on the shipyard side or in the engineering side, but I've sat in the program offices and been like, what is it you do? Oh, you don't know either? So to Tim, who's listening, I would say, we could do better. These are areas we could improve in. And I think it's finding creative ways. We do the Hack the Machine, we do representative things here, but finding creative ways of showing them, bringing them in the enclave, as you're opening the door, say, hey, I need help. Show me the problem. You would never tell the plumber over the phone, hey, I can't wash the kitchen's broken, the dishwasher doesn't run, but you can't come in and look at it. I'm not going to take a picture. You just have to guess what's wrong with the plumbing in my house that you've never seen, and you have no idea what we do here. We wouldn't do that, right? So that's kind of what we're doing with industry, is saying, yeah, you're a plumber. It's the plumbing issue. Come fix it. Well, tell me a little more. So I think there's maybe a meet in the middle that we got to think about, challenge both sides. They need to listen more. They definitely need to come in and learn the problems. But we got to do a little bit better about opening that communication door.
Oh yeah, we have major work. I mean, right? Say a commercial company wants to go add Google Maps to their iPhone application, right? There's a great SDK that they can go use to incorporate that. There's documentation. I don't have I don't have an SDK published for any of my applications. If you want to interface with, our material management tool or our workforce management tool or anything, those don't exist. I'd say go talk to my DBAs in my, software engineers. That's a hard answer if you really want to distribute that capability out amongst, the government or industry, either one of those. So we're working on that, but, or longer.
Yep. So, gentlemen, I've been given the time signal. We're closing up here. One of the things I do, first of all, thank all three of you for showing up today and having this conversation. I will tell you that CNR, when we put this on, this is something that he's been passionate about every time we've ever done a Hack the Machine, is having these types of conversations, having them be available to everyone to see and engage with. Being virtual, we're kind of all done with virtual in some capacity, right? These kind of conversations are actually a lot more fun in person. I like the fact that we're going to capture this, right? And the people who maybe missed it in the moment can come back and watch it and listen and learn. And so, we give them at Hack the Machine and these Rapid Innovation Challenges a way to intersect. Naval X gives them a way to intersect. You guys, like you said, you have industry days. There's a lot of activity happening in the Navy that we're saying, come to us and help us out. We're trying to move rapidly to change things. And so these are just some of the people who want to see change and are advocates for it, and they speak your language. We do have people in the Navy who speak the language and who understand transformational technology and initiatives and really want to get after it. So thank you, Curtis. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Commander Oslo. I really appreciate you taking the time. And for everyone who is watching at home, thank you for taking that 45 minutes, an hour that we spent talking about this and joining us. Please know that any additional comments that come in, I will funnel back out to the group. And we're going to have other Hack the Machines show up.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Hey.